Hi, Buxton is back, and today I would like us to do a different concept, and that concept that I would like us to cover today is what we call abstracting. Now, this is one of the recap series, if you are wondering. So it means that for you, before you get to a recap, it means that you have some content. You just need a reminder on one of the knowledge that you already have in your package. Now, I told you previously that recap series is they are series that are done on request, and when just an individual, one of my subscribers, just want to get to be reminded about one of the concepts that he or she learned previously. So we are here with the recap series 002 that is now called abstracting. So before we go deeper into what we are talking about here, then it would be important that we define what abstracting is, and then we now get into basics of how to do abstracting, and why it's important for you to know what we are talking about. So it has come to attention that this is one of the areas which, for instance, if you want to go for a professional exam, it's one of those traditional ways of one of the processes of getting into billing. As you all know that there are stages before you now have a bill or a bills of quantities, for you to say so. Then you need to follow a given process. I've told you it's a traditional method or a traditional way of this of approach in quantity surveying. But then what's also important is that not all these traditional ways are abandoned in entirety, because some of them are still applicable. And I've told you also so much importance is that when you want to go through a professional exam, then you actually need to know the concept of abstracting. So first things forward, abstracting in definition would mean a summary of your takeoff. Yeah, for example, after you've taken off your drawing, you've done your measurements using the first principles, then you need now to do a summary. A summary would mean that you are just taking directly from what you've done in terms of the items you've taken off using the first principles. Then you now take them to a special paper. I would call it special because you can see it has got different columns. So you take that, you take your working from that given from the takeoffs, and then you now summarize them in the format that you can see on your screen. In that format, so once you've done them in that format, and then you now are able to present that summary in that given way, you'll also notice that there are given lines on it, which we are going to cover just briefly in the next coming minutes or so. So let's start. An abstracting, I've told you, it's a summary of one of the processes of preparation of your bills of quantities. So when you're summarizing that, there are given ways of doing so, and then you now have to follow a given steps before you reach what we call now abstracting. So to bring you up to speed, I've just mentioned that abstracting is one of the processes. So there are a few processes also that are also following this given procedure before you get to this given part. So one of them is the takeoff. I've just told you that is also, you can also call it the measurement. And this given process, or this given step of measurement, follows the so-called first principles. And then you take it off, you take your drawings off. After that, you do what you call the squaring, and then you now have so you have your drawings. For instance, this is a section of a 2D section of a typical a typical pit foundation. So for instance, this is now our drawing which we've extracted from the given details, the drawings that have been prepared, and now we are looking forward to preparing now what we call an abstract of that given takeoff. So from the first principles, you have to take the drawing that you have, internalize them, be able to interpret them well, including the lengths, widths, taking into consideration the units of measuring each and every item. Then the next process would be the next process from this will now be the takeoff. And just to mention that this being a recap, before you reach this point, then it's important that you have some knowledge and you've already done 1 or 2 steps which is leading you to this point, to mean that you are not starting from scratch, you are not starting afresh. You already have an idea of takeoff, you have an idea of measurement, and also these are given slide that I'm presenting right now should be familiar to you in one way or another. So you have a takeoff list, you've prepared your items which you can see there. You have those lists. In our recap, in the beginner series, you are going to be able to see these given items, what each of them mean. But for now, being a recap, then it's not going to indulge into step by step in these given items. So we have site clearance, oversized excavation, pit excavation, rock excavation, and all the 2 items, concrete works, blinding, column bases, columns, and formwork, as you've been presented with in that given screen that I've shared. So once you have these, for instance, just to mention, by the way, for if you might have just missed a point, then we have these columns. Now the squaring column, timesing column, squaring, we have it. So on this, this is one of the typical takeoffs that have been done based on a different plan, which we'll be going into very soon, probably in the next episode, where we are going to be showing from the beginner series. Now, just to bring you up to speed, for the one that I've highlighted, that is now column 1, then this is column 2, then the one that I'm highlighting next is column 3. So to start with the column 1, that is now what we call timesing column, then dimension column, and then column 3 is what we call the squaring column, in that order. So just take a note of the columns as they have been highlighted in that given presentation. So in column 1, I've just told you it's the timesing column, and then dimension column. So your dimensions, which also the order will be, if you've forgotten the order, you need to follow up in the next in the upcoming beginner series 01, where you will be told the principles, the types of the different components of this takeoff sheet. So just for now, for the purposes of the recap, for those who have forgotten, column 1 I've told you is the timesing column. So what is it about, and why is it necessary for the takeoff? So for the timesing column, then you need to put items to deal with timesing. So multiplication purposes for a simpler term. So once you have your dimensions, which are the ones that I've shown here, let me just also highlight them again. Very nice. So that is now the dimensions of that given that you've extracted from your plan. So you have your dimensions. Now that is why it's called dimension column. Then column 1 is now called timesing. You can see there is a 5, for instance, there is a 10 in this case, there is another 6, there is a 12. So those are now the multiplicative figures. For example, if you have columns of given number, now you are multiplying those columns. For instance, if they are 12, or if you have 10 of them, 6 of them, in what we call the timesing column. Then at the middle is now the dimension, which is normally coming first, because you have your dimensions directly read from your plan, from your building plan, and then you have the timesing. Then at column 3, which is now coming last in this case, actually second last, because we have the fourth column, which I'm just going to tell you about in the coming few seconds. So column 3 is what we call the squaring column. In your squaring column, then you have the items as they follow: 1, 2, 3. In the squaring column, now you are doing now the actual calculation. Now you've done, for instance, you take 2.6 times 2.5. I'm talking about the last presentation here, the last bit of keying in. Just look at what I've highlighted. So you have that given component. Let me just remove that because I can see it's beyond what I wanted to explain. So let's just stick to this given square. So we have 2.6, we have 2.5, 1.5, then times 12. So you take your 2.6 times 2.5 times 1.5, then times 12, you get now the product on the squaring column. So your product from whatever you've multiplied should appear on the squaring column. And then after that, now you have all the items. You have the squaring column for item 1, that is now the 5 times 1 times 1 times 0.8. Then you add to the other product, which is 23, 23.4, then 66, then 117. So you add all that, you get a total of 210.04. Now after you've done this, then you, of course, you make your description, and then now this is column 4. So for your column 4, then this is what happens. In your, you have what we call, you can see there, I've just highlighted, I've noted for you column 4. So at the fourth column, now you have to express the description. Now this is also the part that is now called the waste column. So in this column you have your description. You also have now the raw calculations before you now take them to the other side of dimension. So in that side you will see now you are talking about the length. How did you get up to that length? You are talking about the width. How did you reach to that width? And then also depth for those items which have got four, let me say all the three dimensions in place. So dimension 1, you talk about the length in that order. Dimension 2, you're talking about the width, and then dimension 3, you're talking about the depth, or you can also refer to it as a height. Well, so once you have all that, you've done them here from at your waste calculation and the description as well, then you now have that given item. For instance, here we are talking about excavation for column pits. So once you've done all that, you've already shown your processes 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Then you now need to do what we call a bracketing. So you can see that given line coming all the way, and then you close it top and bottom. So once that is done, now you have what we call a full description for one item. So you have the description, you have the quantities done, you have the squaring already done, and then you've also summed all the squaring for that given item. For instance, here we are talking about 210. So after that process, now you're now going to do now what we call the abstracting. So in the abstracting, of course, bearing in mind that you've done stage 1, you've done stage 2, you've taken off, you've now entered your dimensions. Okay, first of all, you take your drawing. Second, you now do your raw calculations of getting the length, width, and the height or the depth for those given elements, depending also on what you are talking about or on what you are measuring. So you've done your raw calculations at the waist. This is now what we call the waist, the column 4. Okay, you done your waist calculations at column 4. Then you now enter those dimensions to the dimension column. We are talking about here column 2. Then if there are items with more than two similar typical items, for instance pad foundations, then you now need to have now what we call the timesing column 1 that we started with in our explanation. Once that is complete, you now have a squaring column. Just take note of that, how that process is coming along. Column 3, you now have your squaring column. You've summed them up, you have your total for a specific item. For instance, here we are talking about 210 cubic meters for this given bit. Well, then you've also bracketed to mean that that given particular item is complete. Then we now move to now a summary of all these that have been done. A summary of what has been done in this case is now taken to the next stage of what we call an abstracting sheet. So for this abstracting sheet, I've told you in matters of definition, I've made it clear that an abstracting sheet or an abstracting precedes now what we call the billing, and it's basically a summary of what has been done in the previous what I've just explained for you in just a few seconds ago. Now in this case, you're now doing abstracting. Basically you are making a summary, but then you now need to know of this summary, what should it contain, how should it be done, and exactly how do I complete everything in terms of abstracting. Then that brings, well, now we are getting into abstracting bit. Let's just take a look to the structure of an typical abstracting sheet, how it looks like, and the various components, what you need to put into various parts of this given paper. So one, we have this part here that is called this first part. Of course, at the top you can have your description. You can have your description of whatever you are abstracting. For instance, I'm abstracting a given so as we get into knowing the different parts of an abstracting sheet, then it's important to know that the purpose of preparing this is to summarize the work that you've done previously in matters of taking off based on first principles. When you know how you are moving, then you know the purpose of making this given item, then it will be easier for you to know how to know exactly what to present in it. Okay, that said, I've told you that at the top, make your description abstracting for project so and so, for proposed given plan, just the title as your drawing is reading. Okay, so once you have that in place, and then now you want to dissect this given sheet, you notice that it has got a part that I just want to highlight. So in this given sheet, then it's important to note that the first part that I've highlighted, containing the smaller column and then the other two columns, you'll refer to that as what we call one page. So that will be your page 1, and then the other typical bit will be page 2, and then the other typical bit will be page 3. So when that is taken in, then you now need to know that at the top you have your title. In this given first part, you now have what we call the unit. Okay, now that will be your unit of taking off, the unit that you've used. For instance, when you're talking about excavation, you've done it in cubic meters. So to the very first smaller column, you need to input your unit of measurement. For instance, just what you are going to extract from this point, and then you now take it to bills of quantities. So for example, cubic meter for that given item. And then the next part we are going to talk about description. Okay, so for your description, it's going to include both of the portions, both of the two separations. It's going to cover column 1 and column 2. Actually, let's talk about these to be column 1, the one where we've written our description. Let's talk about it to be column 1. Then let's say this to be column 2. Let's say this to be column 3. So for those three columns we've just talked about, then I've told you that column 1 we are going to input the units. Column 2 and 3 we are going to input description. And description, mind you, we've already done it from the takeoff based on the first principle. So in this case, it's basically a summary, and there is nothing new that we are inputting in this at this particular time. We are just simply making a summary of the first principle takeoff that we've done in just a moment ago. So I want us to make just one of the one that I was using to make our elaboration, which is here. I'm back to it, back to the given point of doing our, where I was elaborating for you that given takeoff. So this is the one that I would like us to abstract, okay? The one that we started with. So the unit here, this was excavation, so the unit here is in cubic meters. So for the cubic meters, it's 210. So the first thing that you need to do is that you're going to be doing these items procedurally, so that you don't jump into the other before you finish on the one which ought to have come first for this given instance. So cubic meters, we've noted that. Then the next one is description. So we're going to talk about excavate for column pits. So we are going to input that description there. Okay, so we talk about excavate for column pits. Excavate for column pits. Depth not exceeding 1.50 meters deep. We just carry it as it is, so you just need to refer to it the way it has been presented there, commencing from the stripped level. Deep, commencing from the stripped level. Okay, so you have your complete description taken in that given instance, the way you put it there. But now the difference that you also need to note is that now in this case we are not going to use abbreviations or the short forms which have been applied in the takeoff at the time of taking off. And the reason is we need to have a complete description here, which is going to be directly taken to the next stage, which is now the billing. So you are not going to be having to do any other thing for that given description. You express it in full as it should be in your bills of quantities. Okay, so that noted. Then these two columns, column 2 and 3, I told you that both of them should have our description. Both of them should contain the description. So what we need to do is that, being that now you're going to write it in hand, it will be easier. But then let me just try if we can merge these given sections so that we have what we need in full in this given point. So basically, once you've merged the given cell so that you have one item, I mean both column 2 and column 3 broken down to make now one column. The idea is both of the columns need to have your description. Okay, so when you're writing it in hand, it's easier, you don't need to merge in any way. But because this is now in our Word document, then I had to merge them so that both description should appear now on both of the columns in this given instance. So once you have that, you have already merged the given columns. So you have your description appearing in column 2 and also in column 3, then you are good. So the next bit now comes to now representing your figures. So we have, for if you might have forgotten, we have a figure here of 210. If you are wondering, the figure here is 210.04. okay, so the next thing that is now going into our abstracting sheet is the figure, but then not as it is, because we need now to round it up. Okay, so this figure is rounded up to the nearest whole figure. Then we have 211 in this case. So once you have your 211 as it is, then you need to represent the page in which that given takeoff is coming from. Okay, now for your reference, because you are making a summary, it would be easier to know that this given figure, this given description, and everything that has been represented at this given time here on the abstract sheet was extracted or was derived from page so and so. So you need to confirm what is the page. Okay, what page was it? That is why you also later on, as we'll be learning into doing our pages, you will also realize that you need to write a page of where you are representing your item. So this is page 2. Okay, so the 210.04, we've already rounded it up to 211, and then you now need to show that it was from page 2 that we had that given item. So you write your page 2, put it in brackets as such. So you already have your summary of the item. In terms of description, the unit is represented. You also have the quantity rounded up, and the page where you've taken that given item also represented in that given manner. So once this is complete, then you now have one of your items already done in as much as abstracting is concerned. So that summarizes the process of abstracting. Of course, I mentioned that while we were starting that before you reach this point, then it needs that you have the basics. You have the basics in matters of first principles. You can interpret your drawing. You can do your first principles. You can do your takeoff. You understand that we did what we call now dimension. We've put our dimensions. Time missing column is taken into consideration. Squaring is done. You've summed up all the items there. Done your description, and then now you do what you call the abstracting, which we've been discussing for a few minutes now, and this is exactly what you need to come up with at this given time. Now if once you are done with this, once this is complete, so as we conclude on this, when you need now the full versions of these such items that I have, based on a more detailed explanation, this was a summary of the same, then books are available. We have different books that are showing this. One of them is the volume 2 of my books. Let me see if I have such presented here. Yes, now this is one of the books, this Mastery of Measurement series. So from this book you will have more elaborations concerning now the abstracting. Now if also you've forgotten when you're watching this recap session and you wonder how you got now to know the takeoff, of course the upcoming series of the beginner series is going to show you now one-on-one on how to build up on your ways of taking the measurements. But then this was the recap. Now if you need a more detail of this, these books are available. You can just put it in the comments that you need the books. The books are available for you to read at a very affordable prices. These complete versions, you can get them at 1,000, 2,000 shillings. You also have, if you just need a section of it, you can buy them at around 500 shillings. just put it in the comment section. You will now get to know you know how to contact me. Get your copies in soft copies, hard copies are available, and also one-on-one sessions are also available that I can organize via Zoom meetings, via Google Meet, so that we have a more elaborate understanding of what I was presenting here. So as we come to a close, you find this so exciting, you find this so educative. Just don't forget to turn on your notification, subscribe as well, so that as we now get to begin a series, if you at all you notice that there is a hitch that you are finding in matters of how to link up now, before you get to now abstracting, then you need to now build up on what you know how to do from the first principles, doing your measurements, the takeoffs. Then the beginner series 001 that is coming next, just immediately after this, is now what you need to build up on your knowledge in matters of measurements, in matters of billing, and so on and so forth. So it was a pleasure to present, to share this knowledge. I appreciate you so much for watching, and I would urge you to please make a subscription, share wide, let's learn together, let's grow together, let's share the knowledge, and thank you so much. See you in the next session coming pretty soon.